Sheriff Lombardo, one guy in a hotel suite with a pile of guns is able to kill 58 people, cause injuries to 500 more, put an entire city on high alert, create international headlines. You can understand why people would say it's hard to believe it was just one guy.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say that. And in the previous press conferences, you've heard me talk about, this guy had to be I think I described him as a yahoo in order to pull this off on their own. Somebody had to know something was going on, or he had assistance in some form or fashion. But the investigation up till now has proved different. As far as we can tell, he's a lone actor acting on his own and planned this meticulously, with purpose. But we haven't found another actor that assisted him in this carnage.
Within 24, 36 hours, you knew a heck of a lot about this guy, had put it together. What's sort of the state of the art of what you've learned since then?
Well, 24, 48 hours we did, and it was nondescript. He was I believe it was described as vanilla in some of the newscasts, but I could use that word vanilla with him because he wasn't on our radar. He wasn't on the federal database radar. He wasn't on our local radar. He wasn't even in our criminal radar. My understanding, he had 2 previous traffic citations. And that's just about it. We've learned that he had some success via real estate, either management or sales of real estate. He previously was a CPA. He had some various jobs, lived in various places, but he became a prolific gambler. And then over time, he's gone up and down in his wealth associated with gambling and real estate and everything else that he chose to do. But since 2015, September of 2015, he's lost a significant amount of wealth. And I think that might have a determining factor on what he determined to do.
That first day when we were hearing a description of his background, he sounded like a spook, like a spy. Right. He's got a lot of money. He travels around. He disappears for months at a time. He clearly had some kind of knowledge about guns based on what he did. He had his own plane. He sounds like James Bond.
Yeah, I wouldn't give him that descriptive or that title, but I think it's just because he was just, working in the shadows and nondescript, wasn't out in front of the spotlight. We were a little confused by that. His electronic history, when we went through all his computer systems and everything else, it was really nondescript. So it's I guess you could say spook, but through our investigation, we determined that's not the case, obviously. But he was nondescript.
I mean, he's a guy who kind of slips between the raindrops,
right,
on
exactly.
Purpose. I know you work with the FBI on this case. They've been hand in hand with Metro in trying to put together a picture of this man. And the FBI profilers are the best in the business. Can you share anything about their insights into what made him tick?
I would agree with that descriptive of the profilers. I was duly impressed when they gave us their initial assessment. Obviously, they're still going through it, through interviews with the family members and Mary Lou Danley and other people associated with this individual's life. But it was, he had a narcissistic personality. Determined also he was going through currently probably some bouts of depression, but he was status driven. This individual was status driven based on how he liked to be recognized in the casino environment and how he liked to be recognized by his friends and family. So obviously that was starting to decline, and in a short period of time, and that may have a determining effect on why he decided to do what he did.
I mean, compared to us, he's a big-time gambler. He was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. But,
yeah.
In the Las Vegas picture, he's not a whale, but he expected to be treated like that based on stories of how he interacted with employees.
Yeah, I would say that. I don't know what a big gambler is. Obviously, I don't, because I don't gamble. But I gamble on myself. That's about it when I play in golf. But I don't know. I don't know in the casino environment whether he was considered a big gambler or not. I think in his own mind, he believed himself to be. If you look at the numbers that he did gamble, he was pretty prolific, but he was going in the wrong direction. So I don't know if that had any effect on what he decided to do.
You've said in news conferences that something seems to have set him off in October of 2016 because that's when he accumulated even more guns. What do you think it was?
I don't know. You know, we're doing an autopsy, obviously, on the pathology on his brain. You know, the coroner is in the process of having that completed, which takes some time. So we don't know if he had a mental defect that caused him to all of a sudden change the way he was going to conduct himself or what he was going to do into the future that we all know about. But there had to be some trigger point. And you're right, he started purchasing weapons in a short period of time and a large number of weapons. So there was something that, you know, popped his trigger or caused him to go that direction. And we have yet to determine what that is. You know, I actually hope we find something in the pathology of his brain that help us understand this.
I mean, the grim reality is you may end up with no clear motive at the end of this.
No, you know, we're still in the process of talking to his girlfriend, Mary Lou. She's still being actively interviewed. Matter of fact, this week she's being interviewed again, but we haven't had that one salient point, that trigger point to identify what made him snap. But we're saying what made him snap. Obviously, he took a long time to think this out and processed, obtained the weaponry, the logistics, and thought out the plan and everything else associated with it. So it may be a longer term issue that made him snap per se, but we may not find out.
Is the guess then, October of 2016 is when he is hatching this plot, that he is actively planning something like this. Then he shows up at different music venues that we'll ask about, but it's diabolical, the detail that he went into
right.
to make this happen.
Right, you know, and I don't want to give him any credit. You know, I don't want to say that he's a genius or anything like that, but it was diabolical. I'll use that word. It was a process. He was purposeful in concealing his actions, purposeful and not, you know, conveying what his plans were to other people. At least we haven't been able to determine that. So it was a thought out long process. But the particular October of 2016, what was the triggering point that said, all right, now I'm going to start assembling logistics?
Him going to these other locations where music venues were and large crowds were gathering, including Life is Beautiful downtown. Trial run? Was he just sort of scoping it out? Did he have weapons with him at those venues, or what do you make of that?
Well, I can't speak to any of the other locations, whether he had logistics with them or not. And when I say logistics, firearms or resources, it doesn't appear so. But as far as Life is Beautiful, the electronic footprint that we've gone through doesn't give us any indication he was going to complete his act there. Maybe it was an evaluation, maybe it was a test run, maybe he got spooked. There's a lot of different theories associated with that. And it could have very well been his spot that he was going to do his actions, but it just didn't pan out for him. But as far as review of the video and everything else associated, he was never in the company of another individual. We didn't have indications of large bags being carried into the area. So, you know, it's hard to put it together.
His knowledge of firearms. I mean, he collected guns. He had guns for a lot of years. Suddenly he buys a whole bunch more. And people have speculated he must have really known his stuff when it comes to guns. I've seen statements from former military snipers who said, not really. I mean, what he did, he wasn't acting like a sniper, except for maybe when he was shooting directly at Metro officers. He was just spraying. You know, it takes no expertise to do what he did.
I agree with you. I agree with the people you talk to. You know, anybody can walk into a gun store and say, hey, give me the newest, the coolest, and the baddest weapon. And, you know, whoever's standing behind the counter can provide you that. It doesn't mean you have the knowledge associated with it. But the situation that presented to him, in other words, you had a music venue, a concert venue, with several thousands of folks corralled basically by security fencing. It wasn't difficult to accomplish what he did. So as far as having expertise in weaponry, and you've heard the out there in the public forum talking about he did ranging with scopes and all that stuff. None of that matters. The fact that you have a psychotic individual, a crazed individual in possession of a high capacity firearm shooting into a crowd, it's fairly simple. So, and the one thing about that mindset that we talked about, George, was it was very easy for this individual to disassociate from their victims because of the distance. He's not looking at somebody in the eye. He's not seeing the damage that he's causing because it's so far away. So he's just randomly shooting into a crowd, causing this carnage.
The girlfriend, she's been interviewed a couple of times. You said that she's going to be interviewed again. In general, do you believe her account of things, that she had no idea this is coming, that he sent her away? She thought he was breaking up with her, sent her a bunch of money, that she had no inkling that this was coming?
In general, from what I'm being told from the investigators, that assessment is accurate. But personally, it's hard for me to believe. It's hard for me to believe that an individual, I think my last count was 48 or 49 weapons, would be amassing an armory such as that with some sort of evil intent on the end. There's a lot of people that have hundreds and hundreds of guns, but for this individual to do it at a certain point in time and to do it all with such robust action, you would think that Miss Danley would have some information associated with that. But currently, we haven't been able to pull that out of her, if it's in her. But I have confidence in the investigators.
She's not in custody, but I would guess that somebody's keeping an eye on where she is.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Can I call her, I know it's an amorphous sort of term, but a person of interest she's been described as? Is that still the case?
Yeah, I would still use that term.
The Paddock family, we know about the father's history. Bank robber and, criminal, busted here in Las Vegas. Is that related to how his sons ended up? We know that Stephen Paddock's brother was arrested on some serious charges, that Stephen Paddock himself, what he did. The other brother, who's been on television a lot, you get a weird vibe from the public statements that he's made. Is it something genetic? Is it something dad passed on? What's your guess?
Well, I don't think you're going to rope me into that assessment. The proverbial apple falling from a tree. It's I can't. I would get killed in the mental health world if I said that. But it is strange as you describe it. The issues that are coming to light as we interview the family even further and further. But none of it rises to the level of going up in a hotel room and shooting at thousands of people, hoping to create, as much carnage as you possibly can. None of that rises to that from what you described. But as far as the family being of sound mind, that's yet to be determined.
The brother has had a couple of news conferences in front of his house and made statements.
Right, I've seen those.
Give me your impression. What comes out at you?
Manic. You got to remove some of it because obviously it's his brother that's created the largest shooting in our history. But it's so a lot of his statements associated with that. There's got to be some understanding with that. But he continues to talk and continues to, I would describe, dig a hole. You can see that there's something associated with the family.
You mentioned about no one saw any bags going into the hotel. How did he get all those guns into his room with nobody noticing? Did he have any help?
You know what? I wouldn't say nobody saw him bringing bags in the hotel. People saw him. Obviously, people saw him. But 10 to 15,000 people a day go through those doors, depending on which casino it is. And was he doing it over a period of several days, which would not bring attention to him? I would make that assessment. But there was nothing that stuck out in people's mind. You know, they had experience with this individual. They knew him. Most of the people in the casino environment knew him there. He's been there a frequent flyer, per se, in almost every major casino on the Strip. But something that would make them see something, say something, I can't testify to that or present that to you because I don't know what they saw. But it's just troublesome that he had the ability to bring that many weapons into a room and that we didn't pick up on it.
He found a crease.
Yeah, a crease is a good word. But you know, I don't want anybody perceiving that MGM and Mandalay Bay didn't do their job. You know, it could have been prevented. It could have been prevented on many levels. You know, Mary Lou Danley, his brother, anybody that may have some modicum of information that would presented this individual's state of mind. But apparently, right now, we don't know that.
Talk about the timeline a little bit. You decided early on, right after this, that you were going to be as transparent as possible. You had multiple news conferences every day. Why did you make the decision to go that direction, and do you regret it?
Well, you know, no, I don't regret it. You know, hindsight's 20/20, but there's a couple things I would have done different, but I don't regret anything that I did. I think it's important for the public, not me. You know, the transparency piece is not me. It's for the public to understand whether they are safe or not. And I think that transparency dictates me to do what I did. I think it's important for people to feel comfortable. People are worried, you know, you said it right up front. Was there multiple shooters? Is there somebody helping? And I think it's important to get that information out to help people understand their environment. And unfortunately, well, it wasn't unfortunate. None of the times were inaccurate. It's just the descriptive associated with the time was inaccurate. What exactly happened associated with that time. So I think the most important piece is that we responded very fast. Security helped us in every aspect, and that we saved a lot of lives.
You said up front, and no one heard it, apparently, or a lot of people didn't hear it. Look, this timeline's going to change. We're still gathering information. The sequence of events will change. It did. That generated all kinds of conspiracy theories, but I mean, you said it in the beginning.
Yeah, Monday morning quarterback's real easy, you know, especially in a crisis situation. Everything's dynamic. You know, 22,000 people attending a concert, you know, hundreds of security guards, hundreds of police officers, hundreds of regular pedestrians. Everything's all engaged in this whole formula. For it to be absolutely accurate in the early throes of the event is unacceptable. You can't expect accuracy of that. And that's why I admonish people up front. Hey, timelines are going to change, stories are going to change. Until we get to the bottom of it, take it for what it's worth, with the intent of calming people's fears. And that was the whole intent. And you saw the timelines changed a little bit, but not the timelines per se, but the events associated with the timelines. And what exactly happened with Mr. Campos and my police officers and the suspect timeline shooting. You know, give a minute here or there, it didn't make a difference. What makes a difference is I believe the suspect believed the wolf was at the door and took his own life because our response and his awareness of our response caused him to take his life.
Well, let's walk through the timeline a little bit. It sounds like from the videos, New York Times did a really great analysis putting together 30 or so videos. There were a couple of shots that he fired off, random shots in the beginning before he did the bursts. Is that right?
That's correct. I believe that's accurate. And New York Times did do a good job with that. I saw it. There's some small inaccuracies to it, but overall it's pretty good.
Were those shots maybe at the fuel tanks, do you know?
Could very well have been because they were individual. They could have been the shots that people believe they heard in the early throes of this, and that could be the ones directed to the fuel tank. And maybe he didn't get the flash or the bang that he wanted, and that's where he adjusted his attention to. Plus, Mr. Campos in the hallway causes him to adjust his attention.
So he's evil, diabolical genius shooting at aviation fuel tanks, thinking they're going to blow up, right? I mean, is that the assumption?
Well, I wouldn't use the word genius.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use genius with anything this guy's done, but that would what I would assume.
He thinks he's a smart guy.
Yeah.
He's shooting at the fuel tanks, but it's not going to happen.
Well, no, it's not going to happen. In the research that I've been provided, it's very unlikely that would ever happen because of the flash point of the type of fuel, and then the vapor system is removed on a regular basis. So you remove the fumes, which would be easier to ignite. So it'd be very, very rare for those to explode.
I think there were 12 different bursts that have been identified on the various videos where he does a burst and then there's a break, 20 seconds, sometimes almost 2 minutes. Do you know what's going on in between?
I think he's assessing the crowd, seeing what direction they're going. I think he's had mechanical problems with the weaponry he had in the room with him, changing of weapons because capacity of the magazine was depleted, looking at the monitors that he had set up in the room, checking the hallway. Who knows what's going through his psychotic mind, but that would be the assumptions I would make.
So there were multiple bursts, and then he would stop, he'd start shooting again. Jesus Campos comes in, and then there's other personnel come in, and then things kind of go awry for him. Can you walk me through the sequence of events? Because it's kind of confusing. It looked like in the beginning, Jesus Campos, when he intervened up there and was noticed by the gunman, that's when the shooting into the crowd stopped, but that's not the case, right?
No, so if we back up a little bit, because I want to make sure this is accurate. Sure. and people don't construe my words or think I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but there is a notification of an open door. Obviously, an open door being any customer that has a hotel room. If the door is open for a certain period of time, engineering or security gets a notification. Mr. Campos is sent to evaluate the open door. He had addressed another open door on another floor. He goes to the stairwell to ascend to the 32nd floor in order to address the open door on that floor when he encounters a blocked door at the stairwell doorway. And now we know that it was barricaded by the suspect. Subsequently, he ascended to the next floor, made entry into the hallway, went down to the elevator bank, got down, and then went on the 32nd floor, and then he had encountered the suspect. He received a leg wound. And then he attempted to contact his dispatch. And now that previous timeline that I had talked about, 21:59, 9:59 p.m., was him letting his dispatcher know that the door was blocked in the stairwell. So subsequently, you have a couple minutes of him, going up, going down, elevator, back down the hallway, and then he encounters the suspect. He receives a wound. He attempts to go through his radio, and then he also confirms his communication with dispatch via his cell phone. Hey, I've been shot at. I believe there's an individual in a certain room shooting out, active shooter. He doesn't know whether it's out into the festival or whether it's just strictly at him. And that's no fault of him because he's dealing with the individual in the hallway. And subsequently, he could hear shots being fired along with the engineer, and then police officers arriving. They could hear, actually when the police officers get there, they don't hear it, the shooting, because the suspect had stopped firing. But there was a volley back into the hallway at Mr. Campos during all that. So one of the time gaps that you identified that was pretty accurate with the New York Times video was we believe that the suspect had turned his attention back to the hallway and discharged a weapon into the hallway.
A lot of questions about Jesus Campos calling dispatch and what happened in there. Was there an error in the logs or some kind of confusion about the time sequence after that?
Well, no, we believed, in my early presentation, we believed that there were shots fired at 21:59, but actually it was when he encountered the blocked door. So that's when it was put in the log. So we didn't know the shots were fired until around 10:05, like 10:04:55, something like that. That's when we actually determined through calls for service, CAD, computer-aided dispatch, body-worn cameras, other people observation through videos like Uber and taxis and things like that. We feel pretty comfortable the actual amounts or the large amounts of firing by the suspect occurred right around 10:05.
Evaluate for me, now that you've had some time to think about it, the response time, both in getting personnel to the scene and then breaching the room.
Well, the response time, in my opinion, was amazing. So we had 2 officers that were present at the Mandalay Bay handling another call for service. They become aware of a possible active shooter. They start to receive phone calls via security and marrying up to security that there was something occurring at one of the upper floors. So they had a good assessment of approximately what floor it could be. So they ascended up through the stairwell to, a couple floors. Then they encountered the blocked doorway, similar to what Mr. Campos had described. So that was right around 10 minutes. They were able to do that. So you have, that's pretty amazing. In public safety time, you call in dispatch, you get advised, you formulate a plan, you ascend stairwells, you have no idea what floor it is, you're receiving information from disparate directions, and then you encounter this blocked doorway, and that was right around 10 minutes. And then our other officers that ascended via the elevator bank and came out into the foyer or the hallway there from the elevator bank, that was right around 12 minutes. But during that time, the suspect had stopped firing. And so when we don't hear any firing taking place, then it becomes slow and methodical. It's important for us to extricate the people that are staying in the rooms associated to the suspect's room to ensure their safety, formulate a plan to breach the suspect's room. Now, in normal practice, if we were going to execute a search warrant, say on a barricaded individual, we could take all the time we need and bring all the resources to bear to ensure everybody's safety. In this case, because of what the suspect did, the officers made the decision to breach this doorway of the hotel room in case this guy was reloading. Maybe he was reloading magazines. We didn't want to give him the opportunity to keep firing. And then when they made entry, they found out he had committed suicide.
You know why he did that? What's your guess at what point he just made that decision? Because as we're going to discuss, he had plans, at least a plan, to get out of there.
Well, I don't know if it was a plan. I don't know if it was a plan to get out of there. And we could discuss it. But maybe he felt like he accomplished what he needed, what he wanted to accomplish. Maybe he was aware of us being at the door and afraid of us breaching the doorway. Because we know through his computer he did research police tactics. So he had to have been aware that we were probably going to come in the door at any minute. Maybe that was his decision point. And then you alluded to an escape plan, and I talked about a possible escape plan. He had equipment in there for survivability in the room. And he also had a vehicle still there at the Mandalay Bay that had some binary explosives in it still. So did he have a plan to go somewhere else and do something with that? If he had the ability to escape, would that be his plan? So there's a lot of questions that will probably never be answered. So whether he had a plan to just commit suicide there, or whether he had a plan to escape if the opportunity presented itself.
The explosives in the car, was it rigged to go?
No. No. It would have to be set up in order to go.
So maybe he ran out of time, or it's hard to figure out what
I don't
he had
know.
in mind.
Maybe the plan was to have it somewhere else. Maybe the plan was to do an explosion somewhere else, and he changed his mind. I don't know what the answer to that question is.
During those first few confusing moments, it's panic, people don't know what to do, there are gunshots and ricochet and sounds coming from all over the place. You get reports of shooters at other hotels. You send officers all over the place, right?
Yeah, that's practice for us. That's protocol for us. We make assumptions that there's going to be more than one event when we encounter. That's what we train for. And that was a result of our trip to Mumbai, as a result of what the terrorists did there. They had multiple locations intending to mess with or confuse the first responders and create as much havoc as they could. So with that in mind, that's how we train. You don't have an over-convergence of resources to one particular event. We did have officers responding from all directions, and on duty, off duty, and the officers that were working the event to address that event. But we were also forming teams on the outside to address any other events as they may arise. And if you listen to the radio traffic when it gets released, it's evident that's what took place. So we got multiple calls. People were running away from the event. They were covered in blood. So people at the different locations was making assumptions. Maybe they were in a firefight there. And that's how they had the injuries. So there's a whole plethora of reasons why. But we had to respond to each one of those calls, ensure that there wasn't another shooter and there was another event taking place. We were able to quickly dispel those very fast because it would be important to do that very fast so you don't have your resources tied up addressing a larger event.
You see several videos online of people saying we had gunshots and glass broken at the Bellagio and people at Planet Hollywood, and there are no other gunshots that are not accounted for by Paddock, right?
No, no other gunshots. The only other gunshots in particular are ours. Earlier question was presented whether there was other suspects firing or whether we had fired, and I had said no. Yeah, directly related to that, to engaging an individual, the answer is no. But what it wasn't out in the public space, and I'm comfortable with talking about it, is we had an accidental discharge in the suspect's room. So we did an explosive breach on the first door, made entry, located the suspect who had committed suicide there, but we encountered a locked door adjacent to the main living area or living room area. You have a bedroom off on one side and a bedroom off on the other side. Well, the bedroom off on the one side where the window was broken facing the fuel tanks, the door had been secured. So we did another explosive breach. And during that explosive breach, one of the officers had an accidental discharge. So nobody was injured, nothing else occurred from that. We're obviously going to do an internal investigation associated with that. So that was the only other shots that I'm aware of.